everyone. Welcome to the Glow Podcast. I'm here today with a very exciting guest, and I am super excited to speak with her. But for those of you who are new here, we are Tailored Marketing. We partner with organizations in health, wellness, and longevity to fuel growth through strategic marketing and sales strategies. So if you are interested, drop a comment below. Thank you so much for coming on, Tanya. I'm so excited to have you. I would love if you would just go ahead and give a little bit of an introduction so the listeners know who you are.
I would be happy to. Thank you for having me. Not to be salacious, Taylor, but I think I'll start by saying I've kind of embarked in this journey moving from colostrum to cannabis to calm. I think that's a good starting point. I have been a serial entrepreneurial for sure for the last 33, 34 years.
Awesome.
Starting with a restaurant when I was 20, but then quickly when I was, building a family, and that even took me by surprise. I started Kangaroo Kids because, you build companies around solving problems that you have or others have, and that's really the birth of all the companies I built. So my first one was Kangaroo Kids. I'm a lactation consultant. I built retail stores that blew up that are still there today. I ended up putting in organic coffee shops. We had big meeting rooms. We had clothing lines. Because when you're building companies, you're continuously solving those problems and needs. And out of that, things keep growing. I sold Kangaroo Kids to my employees, which is the best way to do it. It's still serving moms and families and parents today. And I moved to Europe for a while, but when I came back, I started my company, Water and Trees, which originally, like you, was a marketing agency. It very quickly moved into growth management, mostly because, back in the day in 2006 and 2007, we didn't know what we were doing. Everything changes so fast in marketing, as you know, but building a website was a curious thing. Companies really didn't have websites yet, which is crazy. I mean, back in the day, they were $40,000 to build a robust website. Now they're $500. So you see just how marketing and SEO, back then it was black hat methods. Now it's AI. So just the change in marketing. And I very quickly understood my skill set was, yes, branding and marketing. And I love building the creative side of companies, but it really falls the very rudimentary level of any business is, are you answering the phones? Do you have good customer service? Are you providing a service or a product that people truly need that's high quality? Coming back from Europe, I landed with my kids in Chicago, Illinois. Cannabis, of all things, I was sitting in a surgical center that I was building and reading that medical cannabis coming to Illinois. So at that point, I couldn't look away. I was on husband number 2, another artist, this time a blues musician, token up in my basement. So it was sort of a no-brainer. I understood very quickly, coming from the oldest of 10 kids, an Irish Catholic family that just procreated and drank alcohol, that alcohol was just, a serious problem when it came to blowing up a family tree, and that cannabis, contrary to alcohol, didn't do that, didn't encourage rage. It just had a whole nother relationship to the user getting high medicinally. And for me, that's something I quickly understood I could sell. I ended up looking across the country, understanding that Colorado, where I now live, was the one place that had truly regulated with Prop 64, like, Michigan and Washington and California, where it was this haphazard set of rules, no clear black and white parameters and guidelines to build companies. Colorado was the first to do it. I went to Colorado and I partnered with, at the time, the biggest operator at the time, the Green Solution. I became one of the owners of this family-run business, and we blew it up, Taylor. When I first started dancing with these young boys. Nobody was over the age of 28. They had 4 stores. They had 30,000 square feet of grow and a 2,500 square foot myth. And we went to 800 employees, 14 stores, 300,000 square feet of vertical grow, 35,000 square feet of manufacturing. So we had 168 SKUs that were vertical. And I got to tell you, a decade ago, no one was doing that. So I took that roadshow and brought it to Illinois, where I had raised my kids, and we won licenses, which are hard to do. You know, back in the day, that was like writing a casino RFP. Those were coveted. They were worth millions of dollars right as you won them. And then you had to go build this new company that had never been built before. And typically it was vertically integrated. So what that means is you're McDonald's. Not only are you growing the tomatoes for the ketchup packets, but you got the cows grazing behind and you've got the guys flipping the burgers. So it means that you're tackling every facet of a business from the products that you sell all the way to that relationship with the customer.
Yeah.
You know, for a decade, that's really what I love doing is retail operations. It's what I did from the beginning at Kangaroo Kids. And now I'm going to bring you to Come, of course. I'm not done with cannabis, but I'm bringing you straight into Come. So I have 6 kids. They're all grown up now. I have 2 grandkids. So about 8 years ago, the youngest, was off to college and on their own. And I had just full reign to play and fuck all day. And I did. So for the last 8 years, that is what I do. I make sure every day I spend at least an hour or two, doubling down on the weekends, playing around with sex and drugs. So because that is my passion, I built another company around that. I have a CPG brand called Oh Yes. Yes, the O stand for orgasms, and there's at least 2. So OOYES. And that's really just inextricably tied to sex, drugs, and rock and roll. The rock and roll thing is I am a creature of the 1960s. I was born in 1968, but more than that, counterculture is my jam. Stop shaming my sex and drugs. We need to talk openly about this and engage. We need to push back on the fear mongering and the prohibition. It is dangerous to our kids. It's dangerous to the people that we love. And we need to start doing better at opening that communication and breaking down the prohibition that has incarcerated full, groups of people. It's just been incredibly dangerous. It's been dangerous on the side of overdoses because we live in miscommunication, and that egg with your 2 eggs in a wrought iron pan is confusing because we don't know if that means cannabis. Does that mean crack? Does it mean fentanyl, heroin?
That's so true.
We're not being clear with individuals on what this really means. And that pushing back on that shame is where I live now. And I built brands around it. I guess the last thing I will tell you, not related to Come, but because I am steadfast in my soapbox around pushing back on shame and fear around sex and drugs. I built a nonprofit, a 501c3 called Save My Life, where we give out free Narcan, which is basically the nasal spray, naloxone nasal spray. Well, you're a nurse. You know exactly what that is. But we've got a real crisis globally, but particularly in this country, where we're dumping very dangerous drugs, fentanyl, and now there are worse drugs I don't need to mention, but we lace them in things that our kids have access to. They think they're taking a Xanax that they're handed at a party. It's laced with fentanyl, and we have 45 minutes to an hour to bring them back to life from an overdose. That's unacceptable. I have kids, and I would never want them in a position where they took something and are facing death because we haven't communicated properly or given them the tools to help them. So that's what I've been up to. And now let's just talk. Boy, that was quite a winded introduction.
No, I loved it. You told us all the things. So that's super, super awesome. And I think it's so cool. You started out with saying obviously that you've been a serial entrepreneur for, I think you said like over 30 years, which is super, super amazing. And I'm sure with starting all of these different businesses, you've seen parallels, even though obviously they've all been completely different. So what like would you say are some parallels that you've seen with like, okay, starting a business from the bottom to the top? Like what kind of is the same from one business to the other, and maybe what are some things that are drastically different too?
I'm going to hit the same first because I
Yeah.
think there's more that is the same than is different, even though one is, breastfeeding moms and
Yeah.
parenting, and one is cannabis and drugs, and one is very much sex and drugs. The common denominator is that if you start out with the premise that you're solving a problem that we already discussed, but I think as importantly, that you're always adding value. And that's a big
Yeah.
deal. So I'll give you with Kangaroo Kids, we added so much value. We did home visits. We had bi-weekly, parenting groups. I ended up putting a coffee shop in because nobody would go home. We employed the moms to do craft, a clothing line so that they had buckaroo dollars that they could spend because now they're not working their day job. They're working with
Yeah.
kids. So that was just a continuous effort to solve the problem, but to add value to other people's life. In cannabis, the same. With sex, for me, it's a no-brainer. I built
Yeah.
online sex quiz where you and your partner get to say, oh, yes, no, or maybe so, to 100 different sex acts. You guys
That's
get to
cool.
share it together. Of course, I give you your freak score, but you
Yeah.
get to share it. If you both say yes to a threesome, you may not pull it off that
Yeah.
night, but you're going to have a great night of sex. I mean, chances
Yeah.
are good. So that's part of the adding value. With the Oh Yes ecosystem, I'm building a tech stack right now, like an online desktop app that lets you track your drug use. Now, that's super important, Taylor, because when you look at drug use, people take prescription drugs, they take supplements, they may choose to use recreational drugs, but all of those have intersect with each other in a different way. Some are contraindicated. You should not be taking certain supplements. If you're using cannabis or you're using a classical psychedelic, certainly with prescription drugs, your SSRIs, your hormones, and then of course that expands from that, we really need to understand what you're putting into your body. And by extension, the food that you're eating and the exercise you're doing all play into that flow state. So we take that drug use and intersect it with flow states. Now, flow states are my jam now. Obviously, at a peak move, if I'm using yoga as an analogy, a peak flow state for me is partnered orgasmic pleasure. Now that takes a lot of work to get to
Yeah.
that state, but wow, other flow states that we all engage in and hopefully, progressively practice can be yoga, it can be a runner's high, it can be playing music, playing guitar, a
Yeah.
creative moment. All of those things are spaces that if you can practice them and actualize them, it lets you push back on the noise and the clutter and drop into pure creativity and thinking.
Yeah.
The reason why I even bring up psychoactive drugs such as cannabis or by extension, classical psychedelics, those could be psilocybin, LSD, MDMA. Those are in that bundle of classical psychedelics, is because instead of being fearful of those things, there is an argument that we need to learn about those things.
Yeah.
And if you're choosing to use them, I use them and I'm
Yeah.
pretty happy. If you choose to use those drugs with intention, you can use really remarkable things with your dopamine and your
Yeah.
serotonin and your endorphins and oxytocin and that neurological dance that we all have going on. If you
Yeah.
learn how to play with that and work with that neurochemistry, there's some pretty remarkable things that you can do when you dial in those flow states, that third intersecting piece with We Flow Yo. And again, this is all about adding value to others, but that third intersecting piece is being a female. And
Yeah.
not only being a female, that was absolutely unfair to say, because I'm all about any horny human. But here's where being a female does weigh in. And I'm just going to use cannabis, which is the low-hanging fruit. Women metabolize cannabis 3 times faster than men. Why?
I did not know that.
That's a big thing. Well, and I'll
Yeah.
send you the papers on that. But here's where that's super important because we have fluctuating cycles. We cycle every, let's say, 28 days, and our progesterone and our estrogen and by extension, our testosterone jumps all over the place depending on where we're at in our cycle. That has a clear impact on how we metabolize THC. That estrogen literally, the neurotransmitters and picks up THC at the CB1 receptor. That means we women, we are chemically and biologically different than men. If we don't acknowledge that, how do we dial in these experiences? So again, these are things that have been taken away from us, just like estrogen was taken away from us for, almost 30 years because of misinformation and fear mongering. So too is cannabis, and where we're headed now is we see this movement toward psilocybin and MDMA and really not LSD, but we're really all jumping on board with psilocybin right now because it's a plant-based mushroom. We're acknowledging that it's having dramatic effects to individuals who have PTSD, who are depressed, who have MS. So once we get into that space and we allow research and, to open up and for us to learn, we're talking about just getting the basic information. That's value. So then by extension, once we as humans are allowed to, we're not being shamed anymore. We're allowed to get access to information. That's when those other things come. So I have a brand that has products. Of course, my best product that I love the best, that I keep vats of by my bedside and in the living room. Yeah, you're probably not going to come visit me anymore. Is my FDA cleared silicone lube unplugged?
Yeah.
Listen, I'm old. I'm not having sex without lube. I love lube. But the fact that people don't talk about that and they're having dry, painful sex, that's not cool just because we're shaming sex. So that's where I'm at. I think we need to add value and we need to open communication. And that in and of itself should help us collectively, horny humans, show up and stay present for sex. And that could be, that can be in the shower just masturbating. It doesn't mean you need a partner to do this. But we need to open our minds to it.
Yeah. No, I think education's so important. And especially what you were talking about too with some of the different drugs and things. We're finding out these benefits now because we've known about these drugs for how long, but we're finding out about the benefits now because everybody just kind of wrote it off. It was the same thing you were talking about with estrogen when they were doing those studies and they did them completely improperly. It gave us completely bad results that were not accurate whatsoever. And then for 30 years, everyone's like, nope, no estrogen, no hormones and things. And now we're finding out all of these benefits from it. And so it's just we have to ask these questions and find out the proper information, because if we don't, we're not going to know about these benefits. Like you were talking about with psilocybin helping people with PTSD, especially. We didn't know this because we didn't have our minds open enough to the idea that there would be benefits to it.
Well, come on, that's so right. And if you look at the numbers right now, Taylor, to me, it is mind blowing that in my lifetime, suddenly cannabis was legalized when you were you would go to prison for a joint. So that is mind blowing. But look what's happening with Gen Z. The numbers on that generation ditching alcohol, and by extension, the rest of us. But, alcohol stocks dropped 840 billion just recently. So those are big numbers. Never in 100 years have we seen humans make decisions that alcohol isn't good for us. Quite the contrary. Even in the 60s, you had a cigarette in one hand and a martini in the other, and you're 9 months pregnant. So this is new information that we culturally are deciding this is a lethal substance. It's killing millions of people every year, and we need to stop. But guess what? Humans like to get high. They're not going to stop. So to think that we've ditched alcohol and we're going to go cold turkey, incorrect, my friends. We're picking up this. classical psychedelics, DMA. We're experimenting this thing. So if we want to continue the track of your eggs, just a couple of eggs on a frying pan, and we don't have to give information and research this and give people the tools to do better, we're doing an injustice to all of us. And it's going to have to stop because we're done with alcohol. I mean, the numbers are not lying.
Yeah. No, it's so true.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's just because too, people are becoming more informed. Like, I feel like for a long time, I didn't really know alcohol was bad for you until probably like 7, 8, like 9, 10 years ago. Like, it's been recent. Like, it wasn't like I grew up and like everyone was saying like alcohol's not good for you. But now everyone kind of knows that, it's almost like when people found out cigarettes weren't good for you.
Great analogy with cigarettes.
Yeah, like a lot of people probably knew cigarettes weren't good for you, but they weren't telling the general public. And now we just have so much more access to information with social media, with people. It's not, I don't consider myself an expert on any of the these topics normally that I talk about on my podcast, but I have an opinion about things. And like, I also have a place where I can go and talk about it. And so I think that it's cool that like everyone kind of can have their own opinion.
Well, yeah. Well, I think, Taylor, too, we've been lied to
Yeah.
for so long. And I think especially the younger generation, they're getting their information in silos and they're not buying it. They're not buying this archaic, powers that be telling them what they cannot and can and cannot do. They're sourcing this information on their own. So it's a lot harder to lie to the public now and to push religion on us and to push all this fear mongering because you know what? It's they showed their true colors. We know we've been lied to. So you can't keep doing it.
Yeah, people are a lot more questioning, I guess, is like the best word for it. Like when somebody says something, even if they are considered like an expert or an authority, you're still kind of questioning it. Like even when I go Exactly. Even when I go to the doctor now, like I'm like kind of like it depends on what they're telling me, but I'm like almost questioning things. I'm like, is this the only thing that I can do for
Taylor? I questioned all the doctor stuff. In fact, it just happened to me at my OB visit. They wanted to put me on an estrogen patch, and she tried to spin it like, well, there is a study. It's probably 80 people cohort. It's probably ridiculous. That's the pill, the milligram pill is adverse to your liver. So instead of rolling over and saying, slap me on this, premium patch, I said, I'll read the study. Let's take a look.
Yeah.
Which of course they don't want to hear because they think you're getting your medical advice from Google, but we're not. We're just being discerning.
Yeah. No, I mean, we have a lot of the same access to information as doctors, like, so it's, maybe you're going to look at the information and interpret it differently than me, but we have the same access to information.
That's exactly right. So it's left to us to do our research. And now, I mean, come on, not that AI is foolproof. It very much isn't. But the amount of information that we have at our fingertips and that can even do a deeper dive into. So if we're questioning AI, we can go deeper into AI. How many people were in that study? Yeah. How long was that study for? Because just having, a woman or a man in a suit with a stethoscope tell us what's up isn't rolling anymore. It's not working for us anymore. So if you're going to be a doctor, go be a surgeon. Don't be a GP.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's very true. I feel like social media was kind of the beginning of it. And then now AI has even opened up the floodgates even more, where it's just like, we literally have endless access to information, and it's very, very cool. Sometimes it is like a little scary to think about the access to everything that we have, but it's also, I think there's more pros than cons to it for sure.
Taylor, just the wearables, like, I don't know if you wear one, but I use an Oura Ring. So I'm able to have a very deep understanding of my sleep, my anxiety, my hormones, because it takes my temperature and pulls them at night. So I know when I'm getting old for ovulation, but I know when you're ovulating. You know what I mean? So it's just so much data and information. If we learn how to interpret that, we can take control of our own health, which may indeed include choosing 10 milligrams of cannabis every day to help
Yeah,
fight inflammation, and instead of a glass of wine to help
exactly.
drop us in the mood a little better. But we're in control now of our own health. And that's valuable, because who better than to take care of yourself than you?
Yeah. No, it's so true. I mean,
Yeah.
you have the most invested in you. You probably want the most for yourself, maybe besides like a partner, but it's you're your biggest champion for sure. Well, let everyone know, what is the best place to find you online? What is the best place to find your companies? I will also include all of the links in the show notes as well for easy access.
Well, I will say that sex brand that I mentioned, which is edible sex play, you can get it in the mail, or if you're in particular states, you can get it at a dispensary. That's OOYES.love. But I write a weekly newsletter all about sex, drugs, and
Awesome.
rock and roll. So that's on Substack. I'm very much on LinkedIn. You can follow the newsletter through LinkedIn. It's on the Oh Yes websites. I do pop-ups and events. We do yoga events and sex talks and stuff all over the country. So you can, if any of your listeners are on LinkedIn, of
That's the
course,
best
I guess
place.
that's the old lady social media. I'm on the other ones too, but
I'm on
I'm really
LinkedIn too.
connected on LinkedIn. But yeah, come find me. It's my shtick. I love talking about sex and drugs. And we're going to do a webinar coming up. It looks like it's starting to fill out, but we'll do multiple, where we're really having some really upfront discussions around dosing and what's working for you. And that's not only cannabis, but again, by extension, I live a Taylor between states where my sex and drugs are legal. So I'm in Colorado, but I also am in Oregon, which
Okay.
decriminalized,
Yeah.
and my kids are in Illinois. So I tend
You're back
to
and forth.
move where my rights are not being infringed upon, for sure.
No, that makes sense. I'm in Colorado right now too, so I get
Yeah,
it.
we got it good here.
Yeah, exactly. Well, cool. Well, I'll put everything too in the show notes, and if you have the link for the webinar, then I'll also put it there as well too
That's
for you.
amazing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you and your time and all of your knowledge and insights.
I love it. Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.